What happens when your fiancé's sister frames you for theft? At your own engagement brunch? What if no one defends you? Not even the man you're about to marry? Would you walk away? Or stay and fight for the truth? This is the story of Haley Monroe, a woman who thought she was marrying into love, but discovered betrayal at the hands of someone who should have become family. What Caitlin did was cruel, but what Haley did next, it changed everything. Stay with us, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes silence is the loudest betrayal. I always believed that family dinners were supposed to be warm, a gathering of laughter, wine, and harmless teasing over childhood memories. That's what I expected when Landon and I arrived at his parents' home in Bend, Oregon, a grand, timber-framed house nestled in the pines, filled with the scent of rosemary lamb and polished oak furniture. But what I got was something else entirely. We were there to celebrate. After 3 years together, Landon had proposed, kneeling in the golden light of a Portland sunset, a sapphire ring trembling between us. I had said yes through tears, laughter, and the quiet promise that maybe, just maybe, I'd finally found my place. Landon's parents, Alan and Beth Graves, were gracious, host-wealthy, poised, a little formal but kind. His father poured wine from a crystal decanter. His mother passed dishes with manicured grace. Their approval mattered more than I'd like to admit. And then there was Caitlin, his older sister. From the moment we walked in, Caitlin had been off, too quiet. Her smiles felt stitched on. She arrived late, air-kissing everyone but barely glancing at me. I chalked it up to her usual frostiness. Landon had warned me she's intense, but she means well. She's had a rough few years. Divorced, jobless, living back at home. Still, I wanted to believe the night would go smoothly. As dessert was cleared and coffee brewed, Landon took my hand and stood. "Everyone," he said, clearing his throat with that engineer's blend of nerves and sincerity. "Haley and I are getting married this October, and I couldn't be prouder to build a life with her." Applause followed. Beth gasped and clasped her hands. Alan grinned. My cheeks burned with joy. Even Caitlin forced a small smile. Then she stood up. Slowly, deliberately. Her eyes were locked on me. "I'm sorry," she said, loud enough to cut through the chatter. "But this can't wait." The room stilled. Caitlin held up something in her hand, a leather wallet, dark brown, sleek, designer. "This," she said, voice rising, "was in your bag, Haley." My stomach dropped. "What?" I barely whispered. She pointed to the canvas tote I'd set beside my carapan, innocent, full of a notebook and lip balm. Caitlin yanked the wallet out like it was a trophy. "It's mine." I went to the bathroom, came back, and noticed it missing. I thought maybe I left it in here. And guess what? Found it in your bag. "No," I said, breath caught in my throat. "No, I didn't. Why would I?" Beth covered her mouth. Alan frowned. Landon's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. "It was in her bag," Caitlin insisted. "You can check." I could feel all their eyes on me, burning, searching, doubting. "Caitlin," I said, forcing calm, "I didn't touch your wallet." "Then how did it get in there?" Her tone was sharp, triumphant, laced with accusation. I looked to Landon. He opened his mouth, then shut it. His silence was worse than shouting. Inside, something cracked. The heat of humiliation surged through me. I hadn't felt this exposed since high school, when a classmate spread lies about me to win prom queen. But this was a deeper betrayal. This was family. Beth stood up. "Maybe we should take a moment." "I think we've taken enough moments," Caitlin snapped. "She's a liar," And she's marrying my brother? My hands trembled under the table. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear into the pine-lined silence of the Oregon hills. But I stayed, somehow, and then I looked across the table and met Landon's eyes again. He looked torn, confused, ashamed. But still, he said nothing. That silence, his silence hurt more than the accusation. I smiled then, small, tired, almost amused by the absurdity of it all. "Caitlin," I said quietly, "are you sure that's the only thing you're trying to steal tonight?" Her face twitched. She didn't answer, but I saw it then, the flicker of something behind her eyes. Not righteousness, not fury, fear. I wasn't born into linen napkins and crystal chandeliers. My name is Haley Monroe, and I grew up in Spokane, Washington, in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other's dogs and nobody locked their bikes because, really, no one wanted to steal a rusted Schwinn. My parents ran a small secondhand bookstore, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment above it that always smelled faintly of old paper and burnt toast. Life was simple, and for a while, sweet. But then, one winter night when I was 11, my father collapsed behind the register. A heart attack. Quick, cruel. 3 months later, cancer took my mom. It was as if the universe decided we'd had enough of love. Just like that, my world shrank to one person, my older sister, Julia. Julia was 20 then. A college art student with wild red curls and a sketchbook full of dreams. She dropped everything: her degree, her job prospects, and became my legal guardian. Overnight, she traded charcoal pencils for coupons and shifted from dorm rooms to double shifts. And then, as if that weren't enough, life hit her again. By the time Julia turned 25, a rare autoimmune condition left her wheelchair-bound. Her bones ached constantly, but she never complained, not once. Instead, she taught herself digital design from our cramped living room, built a client list from scratch, and turned our rented duplex into a sanctuary filled with thrift store lamps and watercolor art. She was my lighthouse in every storm. Still is. I never forgot the nights she'd stay up working, then crawl into my room to read me to sleep. "Don't let hard people turn you into someone small," she used to say, stroking my hair. "You're more than your circumstances, Hale." And I tried. I really did. In high school, I fought to blend in among kids whose parents drove Range Rovers and threw ski trips as birthday parties. I wore the same 3 sweaters on rotation and worked part-time at a bakery so I could buy a prom dress that didn't come from the clearance rack at Goodwill. When kids snickered at my off-brand sneakers, I smiled through it. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I worked hard enough, I could earn my way into their world. So I studied like my life depended on it, because in many ways, it did. I landed a scholarship to a state college, took up internships during summers, networked harder than anyone else in my PR program. And when I moved to Seattle at 24, I shared a basement apartment with 2 other girls and lived off frozen peas just to afford rent. That's when I met Landon Graves. He was nothing like the arrogant tech bros that haunted Capitol Hill cafes. He was quieter, kinder, a software engineer who loved cooking and knew every Frank Sinatra song by heart. On our 3rd date, he brought me soup when I was sick and told me he liked the way I listened. No one had ever said that to me before. Slowly, he chipped away at the walls I'd built. He met Julia and cried when she showed him a portrait she'd sketched of us. "You look like you already belong to each other," he said. That was the first moment I started to believe in family again. When he proposed last fall, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safety. Maybe the past hadn't broken me, just sharpened me. Meeting his family felt like stepping into a world I'd only seen in Nancy Meyers movies. Big kitchens, bigger smiles. It all looked perfect. But perfection has cracks, and sometimes the ones smiling hardest are hiding the sharpest knives. Still, I told myself to keep trying. That not everyone gets a Julia. Maybe Caitlin just needed time. Maybe kindness would win her over. But looking back now, standing in the ashes of that dinner, I wonder, was I naive or just desperately hopeful? Looking back, I should have known. The first time I met Caitlin, she shook my hand with her fingers like tweezers loose, cold, polite to the point of condescending. Her smile was tight. Her eyes scanned my outfit like a scanner checking for discounts. I'd worn a navy wrap dress and flats, simple but classic. She wore heels that clicked like punctuation and perfume that smelled like something sold behind glass. "I hear you're in PR," she said, sipping her wine. "That's fun." Landon always did like creative types. I smiled. Too tight. "I love it, yeah. It's fast-paced, and I get to write a lot." She tilted her head. "That must be satisfying. You know, being able to do your little thing and still keep up." It sounded casual, harmless, but I'd learned to hear the subtext in voices like hers. She meant, "You don't belong in our world." From then on, every interaction with Caitlin felt like stepping onto a stage I hadn't auditioned for. She was civil in front of Landon's parents, but cold when we were alone. She'd ask about my job in a tone that implied it was temporary. She'd mention her ex, husband's law firm or friends at Sotheby's, always followed by a deliberate pause, as if waiting for me to measure myself and shrink. Still, I kept showing up, kept smiling, kept offering olive branches no one asked for. So when she emailed me out of the blue just a week after our first dinner together and suggested lunch, I was cautiously hopeful. "Let's reset," she wrote. "My office is near yours anyway. We met at a downtown cafe known for overpriced salads and undercooked salmon." She ordered a lobster roll and a glass of wine. I ordered a side soup and tap water. When the bill came, she made a show of digging through her massive designer bag. "Oh no," she said with a laugh. "I forgot my wallet. I'm such a mess." I offered to cover. She thanked me with a glossy smile and promised to Venmo me as soon as I get back to the office. The Venmo never came. Neither did the apology or even an acknowledgement. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she really did forget. Maybe this was her awkward way of trying to connect. So I agreed to lunch again, and again. Each time, she forgot her wallet. Each time, I paid. By the fourth, oops, I stopped believing in accidents. When I gently brought it up, she scoffed. "Oh, come on, Haley. You're marrying into the family. Why are you keeping score?" I bit back the retort burning on my tongue. "Because I've lived paycheck to paycheck. Because I've walked out of grocery stores with $4.76 left in my bank account. Because I know what it's like to choose between gas and groceries. That's why I keep score. Because I had to. And maybe Caitlin knew that. Maybe that's why she did it." The final straw came outside my office one Tuesday evening. I'd just wrapped a client meeting when she showed up unannounced, leaning against a lamppost, tapping through her phone. "Hey," she called out. "Some friends are grabbing dinner, and I'm a little short. Could you spot me?" I blinked. "What?" She smiled like it was funny. "You know, just $40 or something. I'll pay you back next week." I stared at her, stunned. "Caitlin, you haven't paid me back for lunch, or coffee, or anything." She rolled her eyes. "Are you really nickel and diming me over a few lunches?" "It's not about the money," I said, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. "It's about respect." That's when her smile vanished. "You know what I think?" she said, stepping closer. "I think you're just bitter you don't belong in this family. You think because you clawed your way up from a duplex in Spokane that you're somehow worthy? Landon pities you. I stood there, frozen, the words slicing through every scar I thought had healed. You don't deserve him, she continued. And when this falls apart, don't say I didn't warn you. Then she turned on her heel and walked off into the crowd. I stood alone under the streetlight, the Seattle drizzle soaking my sleeves. I wanted to scream. Instead, I pulled out my phone and texted Landon. We need to talk. That night, I told him everything. He sighed. That's Caitlin. She's complicated. That's not complicated, I said. That's cruel. He didn't argue. She's always had a thing about control, he said quietly. After her divorce, it got worse. She thinks she's protecting the family, but really, she's just afraid. Afraid of what? I didn't ask. What I should have asked was, why are you still letting her do this? But I didn't, because deep down I still believed I could fix it, that kindness could melt cruelty, that if I just held on a little longer, I'd be accepted. So I showed up to that dinner in Bend, Oregon. I smiled through the awkwardness, laughed at Alan's jokes, complimented Beth's wine. And then Caitlin pulled that wallet from the bag beside me and lit the match. I didn't sleep that night, not even a little. I lay in the guest bedroom at the Graves house, staring at the ceiling fan as it rotated like the thoughts spinning through my head. Every second felt like reliving that moment at the table, Caitlin's voice rising, the wallet dangling, the silence that followed. Landon hadn't defended me. Not then. Not right away. He said later that he was in shock, that he couldn't believe his sister would go that far, that it took him a minute to process what was happening. But sometimes, a minute is all it takes to break something. I kept hearing Caitlin's words on loop. You're a liar. You don't belong. He pities you. And worse than her voice was mine. The quiet voice in the back of my mind whispering, what if she's right? I had spent years building this life, brick by brick, from scholarships and side gigs, through rejection emails and roommates who stole my almond milk. I had earned everything I had, but in one dinner, one accusation, one awful silence, I felt 12 years old again. The poor kid with hand-me-down jeans and a backpack that smelled like thrift store dust. And I felt small. Breakfast the next morning was strained. Alan asked about the weather. Beth poured coffee and offered scones like nothing had happened. Caitlin didn't show her face. Landon sat stiffly beside me, trying too hard to make normal conversation. I couldn't eat, could barely swallow water. I said I had an early meeting back in Seattle, that I needed to leave. No one stopped me. The drive back was quiet. Landon kept his hand on my knee, occasionally glancing sideways like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. And I didn't ask him to. When we pulled into my apartment parking lot, he leaned over. Haley, I know you didn't take anything. I never believed that. I stared at the dashboard. But you didn't say it. His face fell. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't want to blow up the dinner. I turned to him slowly. Caitlin accused me of stealing in front of your entire family, and you were worried about the roast lamb going cold? He exhaled, guilt written all over him. I'm sorry. I nodded. But something inside me had already shut. When I walked through my apartment door, I found Julia waiting on the couch, sketchpad on her lap, eyes soft and knowing. She always knew. I dropped my bag and sat beside her like a stone. She didn't say anything, just reached for my hand. And that's when I broke. The tears came hard, fast, ugly. I sobbed until my ribs hurt, until I couldn't feel the difference between anger and shame. Julia pulled me in, resting her chin on top of my head like she used to when we were little. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. The lunches, the insults, the parking lot confrontation, the dinner, the wallet, the silence. When I finished, Julia sat still for a long moment. Then she spoke with a calm so clear it made my breath catch. I laughed through the tears. That's not fair. It's exactly fair, she said gently. You've worked your whole life to build something better. You faced more than most people could handle. And now someone gets to step on that because she doesn't like where you came from? She's his sister, I whispered. His family. And you're yours, Julia said. So who's going to protect you, Haley? That question sat with me all night. I lay in bed listening to the rain ping the window, wondering how something that looked like love could leave you feeling so utterly alone. I had wanted a family, a full one. Holidays and traditions, and a mother-in-law who'd pass down recipes. I thought the Graves could be that. But maybe wanting something doesn't mean it's real. And maybe silence is its own kind of betrayal. Julia didn't raise me to fight dirty, but she did raise me to fight smart. A week after the dinner, she rolled into my living room with that familiar spark in her eyes, the one that usually meant someone was about to get politely, irrevocably outwitted. We're going back to Bend, she announced, brushing her copper curls behind one ear. I blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. You're not going to spend the rest of your life letting that woman own the last word. We're going back, and you're going to sit there with your chin high and your spine straight and show them who you are. I don't want to cause drama. This isn't drama, Julia said. It's defense. Beth had invited us back for a small weekend brunch. She claimed it was to smooth things over, though she never apologized outright. I'd been planning to declinino. Part of me wanted another round in that lion's den. But Julia's face hardened in that soft, scary way it does when she's already decided the outcome. I'll go with you. She said it like a statement, not a favor, and that changed everything. So, 2 days later, we arrived at the Graves estate again, this time with Julia's wheelchair gliding across the cobblestone driveway like a chariot. I wore a slate blue dress. Neat, elegant, unapologetic. Landon met us at the door. He looked relieved to see me. You came. I brought backup, I said, nodding toward Julia. He gave her an awkward hug. Thanks for coming. Really. Inside, the brunch table was dressed to impress. Wildflower centerpieces, pressed linens, flutes of mimosa. Alan and Beth smiled too widely. Caitlin sat at the far end, flipping through her phone, sunglasses still perched on her head indoors. Like she was shielding herself from light she didn't earn. Julia parked beside me. As she settled in, she placed her leather bag of worn caramel Todorite beside her wheelchair. It was intentional. I saw that immediately. Caitlin's eyes clocked the bag, and something in her flickered. The meal began quietly. Polite small talk. Landon tried to diffuse the tension by telling a story about his college roommates. Julia asked Beth about her garden. I nodded, smiled, played the part. Then Caitlin excused herself to the bathroom. She walked behind Julia. I felt Julia's fingers tighten slightly on her napkin. Minutes passed. When Caitlin returned, she looked well different. Too calm. Too collected. She took her seat, crossed her legs, and scanned the table like a hawk circling prey. Then it began. Wait, she said, loud enough to pierce the calm. Where's my wallet? Everyone froze. Caitlin stood up slowly, walked around the table to Julia's bag, and with an exaggerated gasp plucked her leather wallet from the tote's side pocket. Oh my God, she said, holding it high like a magician revealing a rabbit. You've got to be kidding me. Again? Her eyes went straight to me. Seriously, Haley? We're doing this again? My pulse pounded, but I didn't move. Neither did Julia. She raised one eyebrow, then calmly said, Caitlin, that's my bag. Silence fell like snow. Caitlin blinked. No, wait. What? Julia wheeled herself back slightly from the table and gestured. That bag has a scratch on the side from the elevator at my building. It's mine. I brought it. Saturday it next to me. I saw you reach toward it when you walked behind me earlier. Caitlin's eyes darted between us. I thought she began. You thought it was Haley's, Julia said, still calm. Because you assumed no one else here would notice. You thought you could plant your wallet in someone's bag again and get away with it. Landon stood up. Caitlin, tell me you didn't do this. She looked caught. Mouth parted, words failing. I stayed seated, breathing through the fire in my chest. Julia turned to her. You picked the wrong sister's bag this time. Caitlin's face froze. For the first time since I met her, she didn't have a comeback. Her fingers clenched around the wallet. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Just silence. Unmasked, unraveling. Landon took a slow step forward. His voice was quieter than I expected, but sharp. Caitlin, he said, did you plant your wallet again on purpose? She blinked, eyes bouncing between him, me, and Julia like a child, caught in a lie she didn't prepare for. Tu thought it was Haley's, she stammered. I thought. Julia's expression didn't change. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move her chair. She just looked at Caitlin the way you'd look at someone you no longer feared. Then you assumed wrong, Julia said. Beth gasped. Wait again? What does she mean? Again? Landon turned to his parents. Because Caitlin pulled this same stunt last week. At dinner, she grabbed a wallet out of a bag beside Haley and accused her of stealing. Without proof? Alan asked, stunned. There was no proof because there was no crime, Julia said calmly. Caitlin set her up. Caitlin scoffed, voice rising. You're all ganging up on me. This isn't fair. I just made a mistake. A mistake? I said quietly. My first words since it all began. You tried to humiliate me. Twice. Beth was pale now, her hands gripping the tablecloth. Caitlin, please tell me this isn't true. Please. Caitlin's defenses collapsed. She doesn't belong here, she shouted. She's not like us. She's fake. She came from nothing, and now she thinks she's better than me? There it was. The real reason. Not about wallets. Not about misunderstandings, but about pride. Jealousy. Entitlement. And fear. She worked for everything she has, Julia said firmly. You can't say the same. That stung. Caitlin's eyes flashed. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, Julia said. I know you borrowed hundreds of dollars from Haley and never paid her back. I know you've used your family as a cushion while treating others like dirt. Landon stepped in again. I saw the emails, Caitlin. She turned to him. What emails? He looked sad, older, like he'd aged a decade in 5 minutes. The ones you sent to Mom, to Dad, telling them Haley was using me for money, that she was social climbing, that she wasn't trustworthy. Caitlin's mouth dropped open. You read those? She asked. I did, he replied. And I didn't believe a word of them. Beth let out a soft sob. Alan stood behind her, hand on her shoulder, his face unreadable. Julia leaned toward Caitlin, voice low but firm. You spent so much time trying to paint my sister as a gold digger, but the truth is, Haley never took advantage of your family. You did. There was no venom in her voice. Just fact. I could feel my chest tighten not with pain, but release. The kind that comes when the weight finally shifts off your back after being there too long. Caitlin turned to her parents. You're really going to take their side? Alan spoke for the first time. We're not choosing sides. We're acknowledging truth. And the truth is, this was deliberate, malicious, and incredibly disappointing. Beth nodded. We've enabled this behavior for too long. I'm your daughter, Caitlin hissed. And Haley is going to be your sister-in-law, Beth replied. Or at least, she was, until you made that near impossible. Landon looked at me, his eyes full of regret. I should have said something sooner. I should have protected you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You're doing it now. He stepped closer and put his hand on my shoulder. Solid, warm, steady. I love you, he said. And if you still want this, if you still want US, I'm ready to fight for it. I nodded, too full of emotion to speak. Julia broke the silence. There's one thing left. She turned to Caitlin. You owe my sister an apology. And a refund, Caitlin sneered. This is insane. Alan crossed his arms. You either apologize and repay what you owe, or you don't speak to this family again until you're ready to take responsibility. Beth, still shaking, added, That's not punishment, Caitlin. That's protection for the rest of us. Caitlin's lip trembled, but she didn't speak. Instead, she spun on her heel and stormed out the front door, slamming it hard enough to make the glasses clink. And just like that, the storm passed. I stood there for a moment, stunned by the stillness, the sunlight streaming through the windows, Julia's calm breath, Landon's hand holding mine. It was over. Not with rage, not with vengeance, but with truth and with enough dignity left standing to call it justice. A week passed before Caitlin reached out. I was chopping basil in the kitchen when my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen like a ghost I hadn't invited back. For a second, I froze. Then I wiped my hands on a dish towel and picked up. Haley. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. I'm in a rough spot. Debt collectors. My credit's a mess. I lost the apartment. I stayed quiet. I know things got tense, she continued. But we're family, right? Maybe you could lend me just a little. Help me get through this? There it was again. The same cycle, the same request, different wrapping. My voice was steady when I answered. Caitlin, you framed me. You lied. You never paid back a single thing you borrowed, and you tried to break me publicly twice. She sighed. I was angry. I thought you were stealing my brother. I panicked. You weren't panicking, I said softly. You were calculating. There's a difference. She didn't answer. I took a breath, not from anger but from clarity. I wanted to be your sister, I told her. I gave you every chance, but family isn't who shares your blood. It's who respects your boundaries, who shows up when no one's watching, who doesn't have to check your bag to trust you. Click. I ended the call. And just like that, I exhaled something I hadn't realized I'd been holding on to. Fear. Not of Caitlin, but of conflict, of not being liked, of being seen as the girl who didn't belong. Julia was right. Protecting your peace doesn't make you selfish. It makes you whole. 2 months later, Landon and I got married in a small lakeside ceremony at Crater Lake. The sun glinted off the water like tiny mirrors as we said our vows. No Caitlin, no shadows. Just using the people who stood beside us with real love. Julia rolled down the aisle in a sea glass green dress, her hair pinned up with baby's breath. She adjusted my veil, kissed my cheek, and whispered, You didn't just survive, Haley. You chose. I smiled, knowing exactly what she meant. We moved into a cozy craftsman home in Portland soon, after nothing grand, just warm. On a rainy afternoon, I stood by our window holding a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines that blinked like hope. Landon, I called. He appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. We're going to be parents, I whispered. He pulled me close, and for once, I didn't think about the past. I just breathed in the scent of our home, our life. Caitlin's name came up less and less. Last we heard, she'd left Oregon, maybe California, maybe not. Rumors were just that, echoes of a person still running. But her story isn't mine to carry. Mine is a story of standing up when it's easier to sit down, of choosing dignity over silence, of believing that your worth isn't something anyone else gets to approve or deny. To those of you who followed this story, thank you. You were with me when the room went silent, when the truth was murky, when my voice trembled, and when it didn't. Maybe you've had your own Caitlin. Maybe your betrayal didn't come with designer wallets, but with words behind your back, or someone who smiled while pulling the rug out from under you. If so, I hope you remember this. You are not what they say you are. You are what you stand for when no one else will.